Hi, everyone. We are thrilled that you have joined us today to review some basic counselor information that, if you are new to this profession, might be relevant for you in regards to what are some common terminologies that you may need to know in the profession, and then timelines of college admission. I am Marcy Ritzert. I'm Vice President for Enrollment at Muskingum University. And I'd like to let my colleagues introduce themselves for a minute before we begin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Check, and I am the college advisor at Perrysburg High School, which is a suburb of Toledo.
Hi, everyone. I am Tom Woodford with Hilliard City Schools, and I am the college counselor.
Okay, we are going to move right into some terminology that we think is important. This presentation is not all encompassing. We don't know everything that there is out there, but these are some important things that came to us that we think that you should know to be an effective college counselor. Just very basic, what types of colleges are out there? Obviously, privates, publics, HBCUs are some common terms that you will hear. Just speaking in Ohio, there are 51 private colleges in Ohio. There are 13 public or state-assisted universities in Ohio. Overall, across the country, there's nearly 4,000 different types of universities, community colleges, publics and privates. So many options for our students today. I think these are common terms that many of you will know. We all are of the age that we probably took one of these when we were attempting to go to college, but standardized tests, college entrance exams, the ACT and SAT are the two most popular. But something that has really seen an increase, especially with the pandemic, has been test optional. Although many schools for probably the past decade even have been test optional. So this is not necessarily something new. Test optional allows a student to determine if they are going to submit test scores or not. Another phrase that is not on here that I did want to mention is test blind, which means schools don't look at test scores at all. We all know there is much more to a student than a standardized test score on one day of their life. So some of these schools might be a real option for your students. Talk a minute about college application platforms, and really several different ways anymore to apply. I think it's safe to say, Tom and Lindsay can acknowledge this or not, there are not a whole lot of paper applications left out there for colleges and universities. Almost everything is electronic now. So ranging from the common application, which there are about 900 schools that are part of the common app. Your student can fill out one application and then submit those to the schools of their choice. The coalition broke off from the common app. That's a little bit smaller number of schools that participate in it. I think it's worth mentioning the universal college application. There's only 50 colleges in the country that use this. I'm not really that familiar with it, but just so you know, some of your students may be looking at a small number of schools who require it. And then also individual college websites. Every college and university has a link to their application on their website. That is the bulk of where the Common App and individual college websites are the bulk of where we are seeing most of our applications be submitted. First generation is, maybe depending on the region in which you live, you may have first generation college students, you may not, but it's basically the first in their family to apply and attend a post-secondary institution. This is a rising percentage for many universities in the country. There are often special programs. There might be access programs that specifically target and provide access to first-generation college students. So again, depending on your region and where you're from, this might be a large part of the students that you are helping through the process. We at universities across the country, as a college admission professional, we are always looking for ways that students give us an indicator that they are interested in attending our universities. So your students could come for a campus visit. They can just send us an email. They could maybe register for an event or talk to an admission counselor at a college fair or a high school. They maybe have started a communication with a coach. There's really many ways that your student could demonstrate interest to us that then gets that student in our system. And we can start a communication process and kind of a communication strategy with that student.
Great, thank you so much, Marcy. I am going to jump in now to talk about some of the different application deadlines that your students might come across as they are applying to college. I know that when I started as a college counselor, this was one of the things that took me the longest time to wrap my head around, because there are so many different ways to apply, deadlines to follow, and knowing what all the differences are can be a bit of a challenge. So one of the most common ones that we see here in Ohio is called early action. And applying to a school early action just simply means that if you meet their early deadline in the process, which here in Ohio, most of those, it's a November 1st, a November 15th, maybe a December 15th deadline, you will get a decision back earlier in the process, usually maybe like a December or a January decision from that college. You can apply to as many colleges as you want under early action, and it's just a way to keep things moving in the application process, hearing back early so you can maybe relax and enjoy senior year a little bit. You might also see EA2, early action 2, which is just slightly later in the application deadline, but still ahead of regular decision, which we'll talk about in a moment. Another option you might see, and this is where I think confusion starts to come in, there's something called restrictive early action. And some of the schools that I see this at most frequently is some of the more competitive colleges and universities, your Ivy League schools, those really selective institutions, where if they have a restrictive early action, you still are applying early, so maybe a November 1st, December 1st deadline and hearing back early, but you can only apply if another school has, okay, they may be restricted from applying early decision, which we're going to talk about in a second, or restriction early action to other institutions. So it's not quite as open as the original early action choice, where you can apply to as many schools early action as you want. You would only be able to apply to one school early decision or restrictive early action. Early decision, this one is a binding commitment. So students can only apply to one college under early decision, and they should be sure that this is the school that they want to attend, because if the school decides to admit the student who has applied early decision, the student must attend there. So it is nice. It can perhaps boost your chance of acceptance if you apply early decision somewhere, but you do have to be sure that that is a school that you want to attend, and it is a financial commitment as well. You might also see ED2, which is slightly later in the application process than ED1. Finally, regular decision. This is the common or the late deadline. So this is usually a January or a February deadline for colleges with a response time in March. Then there are many schools out there that are rolling admission, which is simply the college will go ahead and make a decision as soon as they have received all of the students' materials, such as the high school transcript, test scores, anything that they require. Once they have all of those pieces, they're going to go ahead and make the decision and let the student know instead of waiting for a set deadline. A couple other important admissions options to know about is some of your students might see a defer on their decision when they get their decision back from a college. And this just means that the student is not admitted yet, but also not denied yet. So they're still eligible. They'll just be looked at again a little bit later in the process. A deferred enrollment, on the other hand, is a choice by the student. So if the student is admitted somewhere but decides they're not going to attend right away, they can choose to defer that enrollment, usually up to 1 year that they can defer that enrollment. And then a conditional admission might happen when a student is right on the borderline of being admitted somewhere, and the college will offer conditional admission if the student continues to meet certain criteria. Gap year, this is something that we're kind of seeing grow a lot in popularity, especially since the pandemic, where a student might decide to take a year off in between high school and college. And there are some great programs out there, gap year programs, where the student can do some travel or some volunteer work, but it's taking that year off in between. And then finally, there's the wait list. This is something that's offered to students by the colleges where they're waiting to see if they have space available. They're not sure how many students they are going to have accept their offers of admission. And if a student is still interested, they can choose to stay on the wait list. And if a spot opens up, they would be offered one of those spots on the list.
Financial aid. It's funny, every year when I host our financial aid meeting in Hilliard, everybody comes in ready for business. There's not a lot of chit chat. Everybody's got their notepads and everybody's kind of dialed in on how we might be able to finance this. And so financial aid, once students fill out the FAFSA, and we're going to talk more about that, colleges are going to put together a financial aid package for students. And it's going to be combined with federal loans, state loans, federal programs, as well as state programs, local monies as well. We will talk more about that as we go. Financial aid. So October 1st of a child's senior year, students and parents can begin to fill out the FAFSA. It is the free application for federal student aid. This goes live again, October 1st. Parents will be using tax data from 2 years prior, and that is what these colleges use to create a financial aid package for your child. Every school in the country uses this. And then there's a second document that many of the private schools and many of the schools in the South, they might use a CSS profile. The CSS profile can be found on the College Board's website. It will dive much deeper into a family's financial background as well as family assets. One thing I can tell you about both of these documents, when parents fill out the FAFSA, within 72 hours, the federal government is going to run its calculation, and they will come together and have what they call an EFC, Estimated Family Contribution, AKA what the federal government feels you can afford for college. You're not going to agree with it at all, but that's what the baseline data is used for all of these colleges. If you have to fill out the CSS profile, you don't get any of that info back. But as a parent, when you go and visit these schools, if you ask the financial aid folks there, what is the outcome from the CSS profile, they have to tell you. And I would encourage you to ask that question because you already know what the EFC is through the FAFSA, and you would like to know what is the outcome for the EFC for the CSS profile too. And then you can follow up with which one of these are you going to use to create our package. And so you want to know as a parent all of the data that is being used. Grants. Grants are a great word. When you see on your child's financial aid package, when you see the word grant, that is something you do not have to pay back. Grants come from either the college and universities. They have their own money that they can put towards a student in a form of a grant. State governments also have various grants. In the state of Ohio, we have the Ohio First Grant, the Teach Grant for kids who want to go into education, as well as the Ohio College Opportunities Grant. These are all grants that are coming from the state of Ohio for students who live in the state of Ohio that they do not have to pay back. And then at the federal level, if students qualify, they can also get the Pell Grant. All of these grants are based on need, which is an outcome from FAFSA as well as the CSS profile. When we're talking about loans, once a student and a parent, they fill out the FAFSA, part of the financial aid package could include loans. And there's 3 different types of loans here, 2 for students and 1 for parents. And this is where you use the federal government as the bank. These are federal loans. So on the student side, there's a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan. Both of these, you don't have to begin payment on them until 6 months after your student actually finishes college. But there is a difference. The subsidized loan is when the federal government is going to pay the interest for your child while they are in college. The unsubsidized loan, the various interest rates are going to be working as once students take out these loans. So at any time a student is offered both of these loans, they want to use the subsidized loan first, because that's the one that the federal government is going to pay on the interest. Then there's going to be another line item there that's going to say plus loan. That is the parent plus loan. That is a loan that will be in the parent's name. Please understand that the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan will be in the student's name, and it's important to understand that. Work study. This is also a federal program that students have to qualify for. And if they qualify, it will show up on their financial aid package. What is the federal work study program? That is when students can get a part-time job on campus, and that money can be used for books, it can be used for tuition, it can be used for room and board. But is what the best part about this is when students go to fill out the FAFSA the next year, all money that is earned through federal work study is not going to be calculated as part of that and will not hurt your students' financial aid package based on money that they have made. If they get a job at McDonald's, which may pay more, and that sounds great, but all of those funds can be used in the financial aid calculation for the following year. So that's why if you do qualify for federal work study, it is a good idea to take advantage of that. And scholarships. We love to hear about scholarships. Our parents love to hear about scholarships. And so it's also important to understand how these work. I think Lindsay might have referenced Early Action, a school like OSU. They have a November 1st deadline. It's an early action deadline. That's also their scholarship deadline. So it means the application for admission, which is the common application, That's used for also not only to get into OSU, but it's also what they use for all of their college-based scholarships. Other universities might have a scholarship deadline. Others might have separate scholarships that have their own applications, and they may have their own deadlines. It's important when students go on visits that they ask, do you have a scholarship deadline? Do you have other scholarships that have their own application? And if so, where can I find them? Also, a lot of local groups, a lot of local businesses sometimes come together and create local scholarships for kids who live in their communities. And then there's also national scholarships that are open to all students all over the country. A great resource for that is fastweb.com. Students will create a student account, and then national scholarships that match them will show up on their list. Every year we have kids get multiples of those, which is great. It is something that they should really try to take advantage of as well. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, the federal government made a law that said we need to give parents a better idea of what the true cost is to go to said college. And so when we go on websites, we see what the cost is at private schools all over the country, or even out-of-state schools with the out-of-state fees. We see this large number. And so, but many times that is not the actual true cost. So to give parents a better idea, as well as students, a better idea of what that true cost might be, federal law says every university within 2 clicks of the homepage must have a net price calculator. They can't give it its own name. It has to be called a net price calculator. And you will have an opportunity to put in some academic background, some family finance background, and then you will get some information that is an estimate of what the true cost might be to go to that school.
Great. Thank you, Tom, very much. And thank you, Lindsay. We wanted to kind of go a different direction now also to talk about timelines. I think it's important that we kind of discuss the seasons of the college application process. We did break this timeline down by month, but I think it's safe to say that we refer to these seasons in certain ways, and many of the activities that we'll talk about in each of these can happen from month to month. So I'm going to start with late summer. We really kind of refer to this as start of the application season, the research season, for lack of a better phrase for your students. So summer or even August for rising seniors, maybe as early as rising juniors. You can start your college visits. Almost every college and university is open throughout the summer of different levels of busyness on those college campuses. So be prepared for that, that if you do some visits in the summer, it might not be a true picture of what a campus experience would look like for your student. However, it's a great first step to get that initial feeling of what that campus may be like. And if come later in the season, your student wants to make a second visit. Applications can start as early as June 1st. We open our application in June. The Common App does open August 1st. So we are ready. We are closing out, the incoming class, and we are ready to start on the next one. And September, then I think we continue with those college visits. We're continuing with encouraging applications. On the college admissions side of the house, we refer to this as travel season. So some of your high schools may be hosting college fairs. You will probably have college representatives reaching out to you to try to schedule visits. Certainly the pandemic has shifted how we all do business. And those of us on the college side are fully aware that we know how to do virtual visits now. We are virtually recording this session for you. We know that we can shift and reach students in a different way than actually coming to your high school and seeing them. So you also might consider hosting financial aid nights. Many high schools across the state host their own financial aid nights. You can tell that Tom hosts his own because he is a bivvy of information about financial aid. So that might be something for your school to consider as well. And then continuing throughout October and November, again, encourage your students to visit those campuses, encourage college fairs, the applications, be aware of those early decision and early action deadlines. Deadlines are serious. Deadlines are deadlines. And so make sure that your students are maybe keeping a file for every school that they apply to. And so they are aware of what those deadlines are. Host your own financial aid nights again through the fall. The free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, does open on October 1st. So this is a really important date for families to be aware of. And as you go into November, I think that is a good time to start to talk to your students about external scholarships. We're talking about that all the time, but really have them kind of narrow down what some external scholarship options might be for them.
Moving into the winter months here in the college application process, in December, I kind of see this as a period of transition for my students here at Perrysburg High School. Most of my students do apply with early action deadlines. So as I mentioned in the last section, many of my students are submitting their applications November 1st, November 15th. December 1st sees the end of a lot of early action deadlines. So a lot of my students are finishing those up. I do think this is a very popular time for a lot of university scholarships to have their deadlines in early December. I know up here in Northwest Ohio, Bowling Green State University, the University of Toledo, they have some December 1 deadlines for their scholarships, some of their larger scholarship programs. So make sure your students are staying on top of those. If your students have not done the FAFSA yet, this is a great time for them to get it submitted. Some schools might have a priority deadline for their FAFSA that could be December 1. That's a very popular priority deadline, so keep an eye on that. This is also the time of the year that we start to see a lot of college and universities host weekends where they have admitted students come and maybe they have to do an interview for a scholarship. They have full ride scholarship programs, or they have essay programs where they have students come to campus and work on essays. So make sure your students are taking advantage of those opportunities. January, very similar to all of the things that we just discussed in December. This is, again, though, when we start seeing some of our students take a second visit to their schools. Maybe they're starting to see some of those admissions letters come back. They've gotten accepted. And the list is getting a little bit more real of what their choices might be. And in order to make that final choice, they're going to want to go back to campus, see it one more time, and see if they can really picture themselves there. So start encouraging those visits in January. February, more of the same, encourage students to get the FAFSA in if they have not done that yet. Continue attending those college university scholarship programs, taking second visits to colleges, encourage family conversations surrounding decisions and commitments. In February, I know this is when a lot of my students here at Perrysburg are working on those local scholarship applications. So I know Tom mentioned those. Local community organizations often have scholarships to apply for, and this is a very popular season for some of those. In March, they'll be doing similar things that they were doing in February, but they might be going back to campus for an accepted student day. Many college campuses offer that opportunity where they gear the visit to seniors who have already been accepted and helping them take those next steps in the enrollment process. And then in continuing those family conversations around paying for college, financial plans, students will be getting their financial aid packages back from schools by this point. So maybe this becomes I know where I've been accepted, but who is offering me the most money, scholarship wise, financial aid wise, and which decision is going to make the most financial sense for me and my family.
So as we move closer to May 1, which is the decision day, I find, especially with our highest achieving students, April is the most stressful month. In the fall, they were stressed, but at that point, they were just filling in blanks and writing essays and meeting deadlines. The month of April, they actually have to make a choice. And they're so afraid of making the wrong choice. And so we continue to encourage kids to schedule a visit. Again, maybe visit specifically inside the major to talk more about study abroad, talk more about internships and co-ops, to really have a better vision of what it's going to look like once they're there. And maybe even how and what schools offer specifically in the major, how it could be a little different or how it could be the same. But this is the time where we encourage students to continue to communicate with their parents. We have to sometimes talk to parents about maybe even backing off a little bit, give their child a little bit of room because they're afraid of making the wrong choice. But no matter what, we try to encourage all of our kids, all of our students, that no matter what they choose, to be all in with that choice. We don't want to have buyer's remorse and pick one school, but worry about what they might miss at the other school. Okay, we want them to make a choice and then be all in with that choice. Part of this choice too is also taking the financial aid documents and putting them next to each other on the table. Lindsay had mentioned maybe looking at colleges to see who has offered you more. But not only that, it's what the final number is and what we as parents have to pay and what the long-term impact on the student is going to be. So one school might offer you more money, but in the end, it's going to cost you more to go there. You want to look at that final cost and the impact on mom and dad and the impact on the student. Because their 4 years of college are going to fly by, and the more debt they carry with them, it's going to have an impact on the car they drive when they finish school, the place where they live, the city that they may go to, and what have you. But on that May 1, we would encourage you to have a decision day event, have students wear t-shirts, sweatshirts, what have you, glorifying the school that they've chosen and being very, very excited about that. We also encourage faculty to also wear t-shirts, sweatshirts, or whatever from the schools that they've gone to as well. And then June, at that point, it is making your choice, picking your roommate. Hopefully you've already done that. Picking your room. I know students are getting ready to do that real soon at most colleges, making sure that they have their colors picked out for their room. That might be more for some students than others. I know with my two girls, that was a big thing. But being very excited and at the same time, encouraging parents and students to enjoy that time that they have with each other and be very excited about that next step in life. And so at that point, I think that's all that we have to present. Ladies, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, other than that was probably just a tip of the iceberg into what the profession actually entails. So we hope that you found it informative.
If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to all of us. We would love to help you through your first few years as being a school counselor. Thank you and have a great summer.